Hi, so as you've heard a number of times, I'm Yasmin. I've asked to do this lecture and agreed to it swiftly because I was really keen to do this. I'm always very keen to speak to sort of future architects. Obviously, none of you took the advice in not studying architecture, which is usually the first thing that anybody who says that's what they want to do, we say, just to save them a lot of heartache. But it's actually not really quite true. It's actually a very exciting and very inspirational job to have. So what I'm trying to do with this lecture is my personal story. I graduated from the AA 22 years ago, so it's a bit of a longer story, but bear with me. So Wilkinson here to start with, and my journey starts, I'm half Arabic and half German, which is a bizarre place, and I've been in the UK now for a long time. Starting as a child, the first inspirations that I was brought up with and had to see on a regular basis were amazing structures, things I'd never seen before, and that I didn't particularly understand, and that were in complete contrast to what the country was like at that time. We're talking 1970, 1975. It wasn't, the architecture hadn't developed at all in accordance to its sort of amazing past. They had buildings here, which is the ziggurat, which already for these MEP lovers over here from Hydrock, already had a full working services and sewer system all integrated. And I found that absolutely fascinating, again, in a country that's stricken by poverty in those days, that this was their past, and absolutely excellence in building and resilience of the buildings. This was one of my key ones that was, for me, particularly inspirational, which I just couldn't understand as a sort of 7-, 8-year-old, how it could possibly stand up, and more to the point, how is it still standing? Every space within these buildings was designed appropriate to temperature and to people's needs. It was all about functionality and all about what they could achieve in those days within structure and shelter that they could provide. Then we moved to Austria, which was a complete and stark contrast to Iraq, and was a complete surprise. I didn't know it very well before, and quickly became to love, which is still to today my favorite building of all times, because a building is not just about how it looks and who designed it and has it got the best of this and the best of that. A building is a shelter, is a space, a dwelling where you can be and how it makes you feel. And this little building was actually designed by Friedrich Pindt, who is Adolf Loos's, or was Adolf Loos's student, was one of his students. And all it is, it's a little sort of cafe house on one of the hills in Vienna that is still working and is still furnished as it was in the day. And I absolutely love it, and every time I go, I still go there. Talking about Adolf Loos, I found it absolutely fascinating that an architect of the scale of Adolf Loos, I don't know how many of you here have heard of him, would actually do the public toilets in one of Vienna's major parks. And the fact that somebody can go from a great scale to a small scale and not have shame in saying, I'm only doing a small commission, I'm only doing something in a park, I'm actually only doing a toilet in a park, and still does it. And it gives something back to the city. It's created very much part of the history. His buildings are everywhere in various, like I said, various scales. If we go on to Adolf Loos, I had the privilege of living, that's my thing, opposite, which is the building here. I lived right opposite, which at the day was the Israeli embassy. It was probably the starkest building you could live opposite, but it was absolutely amazing. I haven't got pictures here of the interiors, but they were beautiful, all paneled, timber, very clean. And again, it lay in complete contrast to the very ornate Vienna. And again, as a sort of teenager at this point, realizing the differences, always a contrast. There's always a contrast to be had wherever you go. The next building next to it is also Adolf Loos, similar style. It is still in the city of Vienna, and it's right opposite the Emperor's castle, or whatever you want to call it, except that the Emperor wasn't very happy with it at all. Actually, he hated it, and one of his officers overlooked it. And in order to rectify this a little bit and make it a bit easier on the Emperor's eyes, Kaiser Franz Joseph, they decided to put flower pots on the elevation. That was a bit of, and until today, this building has to keep its flower pots. It's become a historical story and a story that people are quite proud of. So again, the contrast, the scale, and how a building makes you feel. After that, I started studying in Vienna and very quickly realized it's going to be a hard and long slog. In Vienna, you study approximately 8 to 10 years, depending how long your parents are happy for you to do so. A very different way of studying. And then I went to the AA. I got out of the AA, like I said, in about 95, just about the time when the Berlin Wall came down, or after the Berlin Wall came down. I was a German speaker in the UK, and therefore there was a lot of work out there for us. German speakers were very popular, never mind architectural, that came by the by. So the first project I really got involved in for Rogers, I worked on various other projects for Grimshaw's and for KPF in Germany as well, in Berlin, but this one was a key one because as a German, it came close to my history. So the Berlin Wall went down and we were part, as Rogers at the time, part of the big Renzo Piano master plan. And this is Potsdamer Platz, which is now where the parliament is, and to redesign and help Germany back on track and get all the government buildings to resettle von Bonn into Berlin. We had the 3 buildings here that you see right along the edge. 2 of them were offices and 1 was residential. I was the lead on the residential project. It was a design and build. And it was an incredible story, to be part of it. The design now, I think, it is what it is, and there's more terracotta than anybody will ever need in their lives because Renzo Piano, being Italian, decided that Germany needed a hell of a lot of terracotta, so it is a bit of the terracotta army of buildings on Potsdamer Platz. And for the architects here, all the drawings were, nearly all of them then, it just started to change, were hand-drawn. A lot of our drawings were still hand-drawn. CAD drawings came in, they were backup, but the main drawings, the main elevations, so this was my hand drawing back in the day, were still hand-drawn. So, you decided to make a few less mistakes, but also you were a bit more relaxed about how you draw because a pen line is not a computer line. You didn't have to draw by the millimeter. You didn't have to have that precise and worry about the door handle because it wasn't required. Nobody could see the door handle. And I think sometimes now in architecture, because you've got the computers, you are so focused in. And I think sometimes it's always worthwhile, again, to consider scale and move out saying, do I actually need to address certain elements on this drawing? Actually, no, I don't, because nobody will see it. So draw and think scale appropriate, and it will also save you time in the long run. This was the finished product. The main partner on this one was Laurie Abbott, who's probably one of the most talented people I've ever worked at Rogers. He's now retired. So yes. Next building, in contrast, this is London, Broadwick Street and Berwick Street. At the time, it doesn't look like anything now. It's the building with a curved roof. It was a big building for Rogers, and it was one of the very first, apart from obviously Lloyd's, city centre buildings that Rogers has done. It's part of the conservation area, it's inner city, and we had a lot of problems, shape and what we could do. We had to align ourselves with adjacent buildings, which is the one to the right of it. Funny enough, all the buildings that we had to align ourselves to are now being torn down. So again, it's change. Never assume that things will stay. Always be ready for things to change and to make your buildings, whatever it is, or products, to grow. Early sketches, just showing, again, for Hydrock over here, just to give them a warm, fuzzy feeling, sun, orientation. But it is important, and it's not a joke. We have a privilege as architects that we provide a basic right that everybody has, like healthcare, like education. Shelter is one of these. And we shelter people, whether it's at work or at home. And therefore, we need to work with people, and we need to work with the environment that they're in. We can't just march in and do what we want to do. Some do, but it's actually irresponsible. We live with these buildings for a long time, so there's always an influence that we have to take on from our surroundings. Again, hand drawings. I tell you what, when you do a hand drawing, you make a decision and you stick to it pretty quickly. Yeah? You can scratch out an ink line about 5 times, then the paper rips, and then you've stuck to your decision. I actually think architectural students should all do one project which is only hand drawn, and then you'll actually see where you are. I think to all the tutors here, maybe it's something to consider. Just a quick one, but again, details, same building, so we designed the big picture and we designed the small picture, whether it's choosing the paint color, it's designing the table, again, the hand drawings, it's a package, and then it's the final package. And if you're lucky, the final package looks pretty much like what you designed to start with. Again, more details and the final product. Scale. We can do big buildings, we can do outdoor floors and do WCs, or we can do restaurants as well. Restaurants are a tricky thing because you've got a client that always knows better. So that is the starting point, and you work with that. And then you hope that after a while they might see the light. So this was the River Cafe in London. Now you see early CAD drawings, very early CAD drawings. Again, it's just the scale. Suddenly you've gone from big buildings. You've gone from a master plan of Potsdamer Platz to a building in the city of London to a small restaurant on the riverfront in London. And again, there we designed everything, from the sofa, from the chairs, from the bar, absolutely everything. So architecture is actually always the same. It doesn't matter whether you design a shed somewhere or whether you design a huge building. The basics and the principles are simply always the same, and the same care should always be given. Here, the chairs, that was a slog, but you know, Richard Rogers, who was part owner of the restaurant, he felt that he needed a back support, so we had to put a back support in, and then people needed to put their feet up. So sometimes a detail like that takes a lot longer than the big picture. This is another project. My husband and I, we left Rogers, I can't remember now exactly the date, early 90s, and started our own practice. We thought, you know, that's middle age, it's time to go and do your own stuff, as a lot of you will do at one point as well. And we were lucky, well, I can now remember the date, it was 1999, in that it was the Millennium Dome, and we got one of the stalls at the Millennium Dome. So there was various numbers of exhibitions, and we got the public zone to design. And obviously the end date, complete date, had to be New Year's Eve of 1999. So it was one of the only projects I ever worked on where there was simply no option. It had to be done. We teamed up at the time with Shuguru Ban. I don't know whether he's a name to any of you. He does a lot of paper, a lot of cardboard designs. So we got him on board. He, by this point, was relatively established in cardboard. And we asked him along to help us with our design. We had, like I said, the public market zone, and it was about getting people into this building and resembling and showing people what happens in their neighborhood. It's about enhancing people's neighborhood, giving them the story and how people can work with their neighborhood. To do that, we came up with the cardboard. So all the columns were actual structural cardboard columns. And we got a lot of the cardboard by involving Blue Peter. So back in the day, we asked through Blue Peter for children to write their names on cardboard or any waste paper that they've got, and that was recycled, and their names was actually then placed below. It was a really great little building. These are all just amateur photographs. Unfortunately, the exhibitions, none of them were what they were meant to be. A different operator took over, but still there were some real gems created for that particular, well, it was a whole year that they stood up, and then sadly, they all just went down. As Spence Associates as well, we got invited, no, we didn't get invited, we got shortlisted for the Turner building in Margate, which is on the Kent coast. I'm trying to find, where's the light?
It's the red one.
Yeah, you say that when you haven't got glasses on, you could be anywhere. Oh yes, the red one. was meant to be here, and that was the pier. We teamed up that because, I'm going to mention teaming up a lot. Architecture is never a thing on its own. Even if you do a project by yourself or within your own office, you will never do it alone because it's simply impossible. We work with consultants at all times for everything, whether it's structures, services, whether it's landscape or acoustics or working environments. And we also collaborate with our colleagues as well to get the best product, because often we are not experts in particular thing. And we definitely weren't experts in design of museums, but Snøhetta in Norway were. So we teamed up with them to create our idea of the Turner Centre, which was different because we like to do it a bit different, because you always, have to try and do something a little bit that creates inspiration, that creates a different thought, that makes people think. So instead of doing it here, which was the safe thing, we actually put it in the water and on the pier. Again, diagrams, inspiration. Diagrams talk more than any CAD drawing ever will. And relationships, the environment, the history, the restaurants. Because Margate at the time was a pretty poor town and was really hitting rock bottom, and this was part of the urban regeneration of the area. It was meant to be the Turner Centre. It is the Turner Centre, and this is a typical Turner painting, and this is what people think when they think Turner. But actually, if you research a bit more, this is also Turner. Very different, much more modern, much more. And that's what our take was. We're not going to just do the museum where you've asked us to do it. We're going to do a Turner. We're going to take it further. Turner was a big lover of Margate, mainly because he had a lover in Margate, which we found out. So we came up with this pebble. There's another sketch in the water. And there's an early render before renders became what they are now. The water was, the building was meant to be shipped in like a ship's hull from Hollandia, which were people that did, no, actually it wasn't Hollandia at the end, it was the Titanic, the same people that did the Titanic at Harland and Wolff. So there's another image. We had Tracy Emin at the time supporting it. Again, we got very much the backing of the town to support it, and it got quite a lot of excitement. Another diagram to please Hydrock. And just various buildings. It had to withstand a 1 in 10,000 year wave. Obviously it doesn't happen very often, but it had to withstand. So we had endless testings that we had to do to make sure that this building, this pebble or rock, could withhold that, and it did. Unfortunately, Kent County got a new head. The project was cancelled as we were going on site, and Chipperfield was the lucky one who built a box in the original site. Lovely box though, not saying. Another project was Stockton, and again, different scale, different things. Architecture are different things. It is a cycle and pedestrian bridge in Stockton-on-Tees, university campus, connecting two sides together, one a bit more derelict than the other. And we wanted to do something special. Although it was just a pedestrian bridge, we teamed up with Technica for that one. Structural engineers. It is a twin-tied arch and very elegant structure. Again, Stockton was also urban regeneration. Let's do something to get the pride and the locals behind this. It's also a river walk. That was the first render that we did. The voting was particularly fantastic for this project, which I think should always be done. The public consultation in local pubs. They put the entries and people voted. So we did get the vote on the beer mats, which was great. And that was the final product. It's called the Infinity Bridge due to its reflection. And it's been a great success. Even to this day, it has changed that environment. Not only the bridge, other things went up as well. But it's something that personally I'm still very proud of. But like I said, it's always about the inspiration. Everything's got to come from somewhere. You have to give an idea a birth, and you have to test this out. And I'm sure that's what all your students do a lot. in your projects. And this was for another bridge in Stratford-upon-Avon, which we didn't win, but I still quite like the sketches that we did. It was meant to be light. It's meant to have minimal shadows. So we went from the leaf. The leaf is something that you get on the river in that environment anyway. And to build with your surrounding and to make it always enhance and not overpower where you are. That was the final design. Again, very light, always trying to avoid as heavy a shadow as possible because of the environment. Again, inspiration. Next bridge, Sunderland, the New Weir Bridge. The inspiration was from the surroundings there, which is the grass, the river grass that goes around there. It's two river banks that are quite separated, Gateshead Way, and it was the union between the two. One had the Stadium of Light on it, and the other one is obviously opposite, and it was to bring and make a positive statement coming in from the A19. I think the bridge height, top of my head, was about 222 meters, accessible from the inside, and only linked at one point at the base. So they were separate structures that moved. This was meant to be a big road bridge. And again, we tried to do something very different in that the lighting was all horizontal, not vertical. This was very new at the time, and we really tried to do something. Again, stretch yourselves, look out what is there. There's always something else or something new. Never look back, be brave, look out and see. And whatever it is that you're doing. Unfortunately, the government changed and the project again didn't happen. It was also part of the lighting that if Sunderland should ever win a match, which is again a very rare thing, nearly like 10,000, it would light up in red, but obviously. And that was just very quickly. Wilkinson Eyre, I've got a few Bristol images here in case there's anybody. These are projects that we've been involved with. This one is obviously the Explore Bristol, which was a Wilkinson Eyre project. The Bristol Schools, which was always one of our key cultural projects. We entered for the Bristol Arena, should have won, didn't, but can't have everything. And this was the Fry Building School of Mathematics. And now comes the fun part. Dyson, we've been doing a lot of work for Dyson. This is Wilkinson Eyre, and I think these are projects that might appeal to you as undergrads. Is the Dyson campus, which we completed last year. So going back a quick bit. This is the original building that Dyson had since 1996, which also Wilkinson Eyre built. So it's been a long-standing involvement. This is an old lino factory, which has since then been refurbished also by Wilkinson Eyre. A new high security research and development building that completed last year, and a new cafe and a sports centre. So really, for the first time, creating a campus for about 2,000 to 3,000 young engineers. This is the existing headquarters building, which was built to be also a manufacturing plant, or manufacturing. Manufacturing moved out 10 years ago, so all of that original building is now a office research and development space, which we are also currently refurbishing. So this was it at the back, and you see all the lorries and everything. All of this we're currently changing into office space for 1,000 people. This is just one room, basically. And it's a lot of fun. This was our initial design for the high security research and design building. So early renders. On site, because it's a high secure building, you shouldn't really look in. So we designed a really mirrored glass, but it's only really mirrored from the outside. From the inside, you would never know. And allowed daylight in as any other glass. So there's the evidence. We are here, very excited, and we can't see through. This is the cafe that I mentioned earlier. This is the D9 Research and Development Building. This is the cafe. James, at one point, once I think we were pretty much on site, decided it was a great idea to put a lightning jet into it. Brilliant idea it was. So back, and we had to design, which is sort of hidden in the ceiling here, quite a lot of extra structure to carry this, although it was empty, it still weighs obviously tons. We never thought that anybody would like it. We thought it was too big. We thought it was absolutely nuts. We thought nobody would ever sit underneath it. We were all wrong. People love it. So again, be prepared to change your mind quite a few times in your career. And everybody sits underneath it. It's the other side that is the emptier side. And it's great fun. James Dyson also thought that having pink chairs would be great fun. The jury is still out on that one, but the plane is really good. Also, again, it's a campus, so they needed to entertain, but we are at Malmesbury, the site, not too far away at all from here, about 35 minutes by car, for people to do something after work. People are very committed, they work hard, and this was a very low budget sports facility, which is now oversubscribed. Again, they didn't believe it would work, it did, and we're now looking into enlarging it a bit. This is the D9 building. So this is the glass that I said, the mirror glass, research and development, and very simple. Laboratories to the middle, it's like a donut, and the desk spaces on the perimeter of this building, allowing the person on the desk to simply walk into the lab and work. It's a very new way of working as well. You're actually on your desk, at your desk very rarely. So you work in the laboratory, you work agile working, and you use your desk as a base. And again, different scales, and still Dyson. We were asked to help collaborate for one of their first Dyson demo, which is the first sort of big shop that they did in London. This is a Chris Wilkinson sketch. And this was then actually the final product. We took back the mezzanine floor, took it out so that people who are outside the shop can always see that something on top. There's nothing worse than a shop where you have to ask, is there any more upstairs? You should know if there's any more upstairs because you'd be able to see it. And it's on Oxford Street, so people on buses, you're always aware. Hence also the lit staircase that says, go upstairs. We didn't have a lot of floor plate, so what we had, although we took some away, but by taking it away, we raised the awareness for the rest of the space. That is the stair, or otherwise known the bane of my life. It was a really hard slog, that one. So this is Dyson IT, which is sort of for exactly where you are now. About a year ago, James Dyson had the idea, and he's a fast thinker, hence it was only a year ago, that it would be great to do a course in engineering, Dyson-based. It's teamed up with Warwick University and allows you to get a bachelor's in engineering. The change there is you work at Dyson. You work 4 years for them, you get a salary, and you come out with experience and a degree. So that was all great, and they had interest straight away, but Dyson was very concerned again. What do we do if we take students in? How do we compete with other universities? How do we entice people to come and study here? Also for 4 years, it's quite a commitment. So we did a lot of work with them to understand the brief and develop the brief for them. Is what a cohort is at the moment, about 30 people, so it's obviously much smaller than here, but they're working within 2,500 people. So how do we entice people to come? We got given the site just under the sports facility, and again, this would be their workspace. So we came up with fantastic square options that we thought were all right. And at one point, James said, no. Simple. He said, I want the buildings to cascade. I want them cascading. I want Habitat 67. After you leave here, Google it. It's, in Malmesbury, a difficult thing to do. So we said, okay, we can do cascade. We've got a bund left, which is the old earth from the last building site. We will use that. Then was early sketches, and what we tried to persuade, and this is what we went into James's office with, to persuade him that the idea that he first had and then we had developed was a good idea. So we walked in with these little building blocks. We made 80 of them, and we brought them in a bag, and we said, James, there's your building in a bag. What do you want? And we laid out our 80 modular pods. So this is how the idea of modular was really born for this project. We thought modular, we thought, where do you do it? Do you have a fly-in factory? Where do you assemble it? How do you get it down? And how do you get it to site? So the more we thought about it, what we said to James is, if I go back here, is why do we not get rid of any circulation space? We actually have no internal circulation space. No corridors, no public toilets, no anything. Everything is in a module, a 4x8 block. No corridors. So whatever happens, happens on what we call this bund, which is sort of this little bit here, and that is your circulation. So very different, and it was very brave, I think, for Dyson to break away from the normal sort of student accommodation. This is purely for the student accommodation. Takes about 80 students. So we went to prefabrication. How do we do it? We went for CLT. There's SIPS panels. There is a very, very more traditional ways, which is timber or metal struts, which are very flexible and very cost efficient. And a lot of these sort of low-cost housing is going that way. But we wanted to push it a bit more. And we've worked with CLT before, which is cross-laminated timber, and realized that this is what we wanted to do because its value, its sustainability is amazing, and you don't even need to finish it internally. It is what it is. It's a very tough product. So we started working on this idea of clusters, of pods. How can a pod look? What should a pod be? We then did a lot of research, went to travel to universities. James then said he wants every pod to be the same for a student as he might want for an exec of his office to stay at. So that was a bit of a challenge, especially with the budget, but we're getting there. Again, just early thoughts. Then this is now sort of the elevation of it, where we have them. This is the bund on the first level. The downstairs pods you enter from floor. The next one up, you go on the bund, and the next one's up, you go from a stair. So every pod has its own front door. It's your own home. And there are some communal pods, which are kitchens, where people are encouraged to get together, and some utility ones as well. So this is the ground floor. The ones in red can be used as a hotel. The rest are all pods. First floor, and then the top floor. And of course, what else do students need? They can't just sit in their rooms all evening in Malmesbury with not much going on. So we've given them a sort of student union communal building, but it's also to bring in the staff as well. This is not just for the students. The students have their bund. This is their sort of village street, their village high street, but they can interact. So this has a student union, it has screening rooms, it has a cafe, it has a small shop, and obviously then immediately above it is a sports facility to really grow the sort of student village. James was a bit concerned about how long it will take somebody to get into their pod. And we really tried to reassure him that really it's not a big deal, and I'm sure lots of you go home a lot further than a few-minute walk, but it still was a concern to him. So again, architecture, you have to do a lot of different things. You have to prove to him, and we did it by iPhone. One day I walked along the length whilst, I might say so, having a very calm cigarette and taking my time. And I realized for me to walk from here to there was 1 minute 55. So we used the iPhone and tracked various routes to prove that really you're never further away from 1.5 minutes to either the communal building or to your friend's pod or anywhere that you need to be. And he said, okay, that's fine, I get it. But it was an exercise. Again, then these are some of the alignments of the pods. Playing around, we use a lot of Rhino for this, but always with the sketches in mind. And this is sort of typical section, ground floor, first floor, second floor. All the furniture is bespoke built, clad in aluminium cladding, anodized aluminium, glazed, fully glazed to the front. Landscape, as we talked, we work with consultants, and landscape is a big part, so we've teamed up with Grant Associates for this, who are sort of local. I think they went a bit overboard with the floral arrangement here. You know, we've got a bit of time, but you get the idea. So this is the bund, and there's the communal building. This is one of the more extreme pods that overhangs. The pods are all cantilevering because the CLT can do it. So we can cantilever by 3 meters purely by the structure that we've used. You can do this up to 3 floors. After that, it gets a bit risky. And actually on Monday, we're going out to Scotland where they are being produced to test the vibrations, and well, fingers crossed it works. Again, the communal building, much simpler design, round building, and always to say that this is an open building. There's no back to it. There is no Manchester view. It is what it is, and it's open to everybody. This is, so Carbon Dynamics, a very small company in Scotland. There's not a lot of people in the UK who can actually put a CLT pod together. So there's two. One of them we dismissed. Carbon Dynamics, a young company up in Scotland at Invergordon, are producing these pods for us. These are the first prototypes. It's great to work on a project. Again, I can see all your prototypes out there, to be able to do something like this at this point of a project of this magnitude. So these are prototypes testing the cladding, which obviously fitted just perfectly. Wood fiber insulation, making sure that everything works. All our services actually run in the insulation, so you have nothing in the pods. This is the sort of our breakup of the design. You've got your CLT, you've got your insulation, you've got your cladding, you've got a sedum roof and a big cassette in the front for your windows. We try to really stick to the modular, so we don't have a lot of different types. We have a hotel room, we have a kitchen as well. I can't see it at the moment. And we've got the typical bedroom here, utility room, kitchen up here for about 11 people. So it's about 4 different types only, and that's what you want to stick to. But they're all the same size. Everything works in exactly the same way. These are quite sweet. You can always have a bit of fun. Yellow is the residentials, yellow is, red is the hotel, green is kitchens, and these are utilities. So you can see how this is broken up. We had a prototype made, and is now in Malmesbury, and which got shipped out for James Dyson's approval. So there it is leaving Invergordon, and then arriving about sort of 24 hours later or more in Malmesbury. Cladding was put on. This is now right in front of James's office. And there are things that are not quite right. And that's the wonderful thing about prototype. The cladding isn't quite right. It's not, the texture, the material of it is not what we had hoped. But it had to be cost efficient. But by proving that even sometimes being cost efficient doesn't give you what you really want, we got the approval to actually go with an anodized, which is much sharper and a nicer product. This is it inside. So you've got your own bathroom, bedroom, study area, shelving and everything, and the glazed door at the back. And this is James Dyson advertising it to his students and asking for feedback. So we work a lot with the students, and we got all their feedback, and it's actually been very, very positive. The only thing that most of them insisted on is that this chair is to be replaced by a beanbag. And I thought, that's a criticism I can take. We can work with that. So that is where we are. This is another walk. This is the path that we talk about, and this is sort of a pretty accurate representation of these pods. And now I'm meant to press play somewhere. I just thought it was a nice image to show how to represent something as well. Thank you.